The scream was muffled, barely audible over the distant hum of lawnmowers and cicadas. But I knew that voice. I knew it like I knew my own heartbeat. I dropped the pharmacy bag, heart slamming against my ribs, and bolted toward the car. Ellie was in there. My baby girl. The sun had turned brutal that afternoon, like it was punishing the pavement. I remember the way the air burned my skin as I ran. I remember the moment my fingers wrapped around the car door handle and refused to budge. Locked. No. No, 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 Ellie. Her face was red, cheeks blotchy. Her tiny hands slapped the window in confusion, fear. Her mouth moved, calling out for me, but I couldn't hear her anymore. All I heard was the deafening thud of blood rushing in my ears. I fumbled for the keys, gone. I had left them in the ignition, engine running, AC on. I'd only been gone for 2 minutes. 2 damn minutes. Someone help me. I screamed. A few heads turned. A man in jogging shorts slowed down, confused. Then I saw her. Mrs. Calloway. Karen. HOA president. Standing by the hedge with arms folded, lips curled into a self-satisfied smirk. I warned you about the noise, she said coldly. You didn't listen. My stomach dropped. What did you do? She didn't answer. Just turned and walked away like she had nothing to do with it. Like my daughter locked inside a boiling car was somehow an inconvenience to her. I grabbed a rock from the flower bed. My hand shook. I didn't care anymore about rules or neighbors or damn HOA bylaws. All I cared about was getting to my daughter. I lifted the rock, took aim, and just as I swung, "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," a cop's voice, a siren, and Ellie wasn't moving anymore. 3 weeks earlier, we were unpacking boxes, full of hope. Our little rental on Maple Lane had the promise of a fresh start, clean sidewalks, manicured lawns, smiling neighbors who waved but never lingered too long. The kind of neighborhood that looked like it belonged in a magazine. It was safe. It was quiet. It was exactly what Ellie needed. My husband, Jason, had picked it out while I was away taking care of my mom after her surgery. "You're going to love it," he said. "HOA run, so everything's organized. No surprises. But life has a way of surprising you." Ellie, our 7-year-old daughter, was born with mild cerebral palsy and a voice that could light up the darkest room. She sang constantly, Disney songs, church hymns, her own made-up tunes about the clouds and the wind. Even after the seizures started last year, even on her hardest days, Ellie would hum to herself, her way of telling the world she was still here, still joyful. That first week in the new house, she sang while coloring on the front porch. She sang in the car with the windows down. She sang on the swings at the local park. To us, it was healing. To some, it was disruptive. The first letter arrived on a Monday, stuffed into our mailbox without postage. Folded neatly, no signature. "Please be mindful of your daughter's noise level. This is a quiet neighborhood." I laughed at first. Jason didn't. "HOAs are weird about this stuff," he muttered. "Let's just be careful." The next day, we met Mrs. Calloway, HOA president, mid-60s, designer sunglasses that never left her face. She introduced herself like she was royalty, and we were lucky to live in her kingdom. "I'm sure your daughter is spirited," she said with a tight smile, watching Ellie draw chalk hearts on the sidewalk. "But perhaps she could keep her singing indoors. It echoes." I bit my tongue, smiled back. "We'll be mindful." But Ellie wasn't the problem. The problem was that she didn't fit the mold. She wasn't silent. She wasn't invisible. By week 2, the complaints became verbal. Mrs. Calloway approached Jason in the driveway. "Is she special needs?" Jason nodded, cautious. "Well, I just think certain sounds can be triggering for others, especially at volume." We started keeping the windows closed. We told Ellie to use her quiet voice. She tried. God, she really tried. But some songs just needed to be sung. One morning, Ellie waved at a neighbor watering his lawn. He didn't wave back. Another day, she left a handmade card on someone's doorstep. It ended up ripped and tossed in our trash can. Still, we tried to stay optimistic. "This is just new neighbor tension," I told Jason. "People will adjust." He wasn't so sure. Then came the sidewalk incident. Ellie used pastel chalk to draw a butterfly and a rainbow near our front gate. 30 minutes later, I caught Mrs. Calloway scrubbing it off with bleach. She can't just vandalize public walkways, she snapped. She's 7, I replied. And it's chalk. That's not the point, she hissed. There are rules here. Some of us value order. Jason stood between us before things escalated. We filed a report with the HOA board. Nothing came of it. Days passed. Ellie kept to herself more. She drew less. She hummed quietly, but no longer sang at full voice unless we were driving. Our car became her little studio, windows rolled up, seatbelt on, hair flying as she belted out her favorite song from The Little Mermaid. And that's what she was doing. The day it happened. The day Mrs. Calloway decided to take matters into her own hands. If we had left that week, maybe things would have been different. Maybe we wouldn't have stayed long enough for the cracks to deepen, for the smiles to vanish, for the neighborhood to show its true face. But we didn't leave. We stayed, because Ellie had finally made a friend. Her name was Sophie. She lived 4 houses down, a sweet, shy girl who brought over cookies one afternoon and asked if Ellie liked to draw horses. For a while, the world felt okay again. The girls played quietly in the backyard. They passed notes, made paper crowns, and sang songs under their breath. But even that happiness made Mrs. Calloway uncomfortable. She's teaching Sophie bad habits, she muttered one morning, loud enough for me to hear as she walked her poodle past our house. That child needs boundaries. I ignored it, but Jason didn't. He'd always been patient, calm, level-headed, a military vet who'd seen war and believed in peace. But one afternoon, as Mrs. Calloway stood just off our driveway watching Ellie and Sophie pretend to be ballerinas, Jason walked right up to her. "Is there a reason you keep watching our daughter?" he asked, calm but direct. Mrs. Calloway didn't blink. "There's a reason people pay dues to live here. We expect a certain standard." Jason's jaw clenched. "She's not a disruption. She's a child." Mrs. Calloway smiled that awful, cold smile. "Then perhaps you should parent her like one." That night, we received an official HOA violation notice in the mail. The reason? Public disturbance due to loud behavior for minors. Second warning. It was signed, formally, by Mrs. Calloway. We were stunned. Jason wanted to fight it. But the HOA was her playground. She ran the board, controlled the meetings. We had no allies. Meanwhile, Ellie kept singing, but only in the car. We didn't know it then, but she had started timing herself. She would sing for exactly 6 minutes, the length of her favorite song, and then stop. She said it was her safe music time. One Saturday afternoon, I took her out for ice cream. On the way back, she asked if we could sit in the car outside our house for a few minutes just to finish her song. I let her. The engine was running. AC on. I scrolled through my phone, watching her in the mirror, mouthing every word, eyes closed, hair swinging. She looked free. That's when Mrs. Calloway appeared again. I saw her in the corner of the mirror, arms folded, frowning. I waved politely. She didn't wave back. Ellie saw her too. Her voice lowered. Her smile faded. She curled into herself, quietly asking, "Is it okay if I stop early?" My heart sank. "You can sing as long as you want, baby." She nodded, but didn't start again. Later that week, Jason got a call from the HOA. They claimed our vehicle had been reported for unauthorized idling and warned us that pollution and unnecessary engine noise could result in fines. When Jason asked who filed the complaint, they refused to say. But we knew. That Friday, it happened again. Ellie asked to sing in the car while I ran inside the daycare to pick up a forgotten medication bag. It would take 2 minutes, max. She'd be buckled in. Engine on. My phone connected to the dashcam. It was a routine we'd done before. But this time, someone was watching. And someone had a plan. While I was inside, Mrs. Calloway walked up to the vehicle. She wore gloves. She circled it like a predator, checking windows, peering through the glass. And then she pulled something from her pocket, an old HOA-issued universal remote key fob, discontinued years ago, but never returned. She pressed the button. The engine stopped. The car locked. AC off. Ellie inside. Our daughter, who struggled with temperature regulation because of her condition. Our daughter, who had just wanted to sing for 6 minutes. The dashcam caught it all. Every step, every calculated movement. But at that moment, I had no idea. I was still walking back from the daycare, humming the same song Ellie was singing just seconds earlier. That's when I heard the scream, and everything unraveled. The sun was merciless that day, one of those July afternoons where the sky itself feels angry. My weather app said 94 degrees Fahrenheit, but the car thermometer was already pushing 101. I remember checking it twice, just to be sure the AC was blowing strong. Ellie was buckled in her booster, singing along to Part of Your World with her eyes closed and arms stretched like she was underwater. I laughed. She had this habit of whispering the high notes like they were secrets. 2 minutes, baby, I said. Stay buckled. I'll be right back. She gave me a thumbs up, mid-chorus, her hair stuck to her forehead but still dancing with joy. I locked eyes with her one last time before stepping out. The daycare door was only 20 feet away. I'd forgotten the medication bag, nothing more than a quick in and out. I signed the form, grabbed the pouch, and exchanged a quick smile with the receptionist. 30 seconds tops. As I turned to the corner back into the parking lot, I knew something was wrong. The air felt still. Silent. Too silent. Ellie always sang the loudest in the middle of her song, but the car was quiet now. I walked faster. Then I saw her, Mrs. Calloway, standing next to our SUV, like she was inspecting it, hands behind her back, sunglasses reflecting the sky. Is there a problem? I asked, slowing only to grab my keys. She turned slowly, smiling. I was concerned, she said. She was making quite a bit of noise again. I unlocked the car. Or tried to. Nothing. My chest tightened. I tried again. Nothing. The doors wouldn't open. I looked through the tinted glass. Ellie was slumped slightly, her forehead glistening, mouth parted. Her eyes were blinking fast, lips moving but no sound. Her cheeks were red. Too red. The AC wasn't running. I ran to the driver's side and tried the manual handle. Still locked. What did you do? I shouted, spinning around to Mrs. Calloway. She didn't flinch. I turned the engine off. A child shouldn't be left in a running vehicle. That's negligence, you know. I froze. You turned off the engine? She lifted something from her pocket, a small black remote. The old HOA master fobs. The kind used before the board upgraded the gates. Jason told me once they never recalled the old ones. I told you, she said coldly, if you wouldn't control her, someone would have to. I dropped the medicine bag. My brain screamed, but my body couldn't catch up. My hands fumbled for my phone, launching the dashcam app. I saw the real-time footage. 30 seconds ago, her face up close to the windshield. Ellie singing. Then, the press of a button, a click. Engine off. I ran back to the car window. Ellie was crying now, mouthing mama. The heat inside the car must have spiked 10 degrees in that minute alone. I slammed my hands on the glass. Hold on, baby. Mama's here. I screamed for help. Someone call 911. A man from the gym next door ran over. A woman from the bakery across the street. Someone pulled out their phone. I'm breaking the window, I said, grabbing a rock from a landscape bed. I raised it high. Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. I turned. A police officer was racing toward me, hand on his belt. My daughter's in there. I cried. She's locked in. She can't breathe. The officer pulled his baton, smashed the window with one hit. Glass rained into the seat. He reached in, unlocked the door, and pulled Ellie out into my arms. She was limp but breathing. Her body was hot, sticky. She clung to me like a baby koala. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They rushed her to the ambulance, checked her vitals, loaded her up with oxygen. She's okay, one said, suffering from heat stress, but you got to her in time. Jason arrived 10 minutes later, skidding to a halt, eyes wide with panic. I didn't even need to explain. The shattered window and flashing lights told the story. When he saw Mrs. Calloway still standing there, arms folded like nothing had happened. I had to hold him back. "I'm pressing charges," I told the officers. Mrs. Calloway didn't argue. She smirked. "I did what any responsible adult would do." "But you locked her in," the officer said. "You disabled the AC. She could have died. Maybe next time her mother won't treat the community like a personal daycare," she muttered. Jason lost it. "You almost killed our daughter." Another officer intervened, placing Mrs. Calloway in handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're being placed under arrest for child endangerment and unauthorized access to private property." Her face finally dropped. As they read her rights and walked her to the squad car, Ellie looked up from the ambulance and whispered, "Mama, was I too loud again?" My throat burned. I hugged her tighter than I ever had. "No, baby," I said, shaking. "You were just perfect." The ambulance doors had just closed when the questions started coming. Fast, clipped, procedural. "What's the child's medical history? How long was she locked in? Was the engine running when you left? Do you have proof she was singing and not in distress beforehand?" I answered them all through tears and trembling hands. Jason stood beside me like a statue, arms crossed, jaw locked. He was fighting every instinct to explode. Officer Daniels, the one who had smashed the window, pulled us aside gently. "Ma'am, do you have any camera footage of what happened?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, the dash cam. It's motion activated. I can pull it up right now." I tapped my phone screen and opened the dashcam app. Heart pounding, I scrubbed through the timeline until the footage came up. The moment played in complete, undeniable clarity. Ellie in the car, singing her heart out. Then, Mrs. Calloway approaching, glancing over her shoulder, pulling out the remote. A pause. Her lips moving, something she said to herself. Then the button press. Engine off. Doors lock. She walks away. We showed the footage to the officers in silence. When it ended, no one spoke for a few seconds. Officer Daniels let out a slow, quiet whistle. "That's enough for a felony charge right there." Jason whispered, "Good." 2 squad cars had shown up by then. The second officer, a younger woman named Evans, approached Mrs. Calloway, who was now sitting on a bench outside the bakery like she was waiting for tea. "Ma'am, do you mind telling us what happened today?" Officer Evans asked, calm but firm. Mrs. Calloway folded her arms. "Of course. I saw a child left in a running car. I've seen enough documentaries to know how dangerous that is. I turned the vehicle off and locked it for her safety. I meant to notify the authorities, but the mother returned." Evans raised an eyebrow. "So you didn't call the police?" "I was about to," she said flatly. Daniels stepped forward. "Ma'am, were you aware the car had AC running and that the child was inside safely and singing?" "She was being disruptive," she said quickly. "The neighborhood has rules. That family, they never respect them." "And how exactly did you have the ability to remotely lock and shut off a private vehicle?" he asked. She opened her mouth, then paused. That pause, was when her story cracked. "They left their car unsecured. I was trying to help." "But you used a discontinued HOA remote from 5 years ago, didn't you?" Evans interjected, holding up the small black key fob we had turned over. "We confirmed it's registered to your name." Her face twitched. "That shouldn't matter. I acted in the child's best interest." Daniel stepped closer. "You didn't act in the child's best interest. You endangered her. You didn't call for help. You stood there and watched her suffer." Mrs. Calloway's voice suddenly rose. "That child screams. Every day. My home is supposed to be peaceful. She sings like she owns the world, like we should all have to listen. Well, I'm done listening." That outburst did it. Daniels nodded to Evans. "Cuff her." She shrieked, "You can't do this to me. I'm the HOA president. I run this neighborhood." Evans calmly read her rights as she was placed into handcuffs. Her protests grew louder, more desperate, but they echoed uselessly across the parking lot. Jason turned to me, a pained look in his eyes. She was never going to stop, was she? I shook my head, but that wasn't the end. Within an hour, the footage had made its way to the local news. Someone from the crowd had filmed the entire confrontation. from the broken window to the arrest, and uploaded it to Facebook. The caption read, HOA president locks special needs girl in hot car to teach mom a lesson. It was shared over 3,000 times before we even made it home. News vans showed up outside our house that night. Neighbors, ones who had never said a word to us, started ringing the doorbell with cupcakes, apology notes, stuffed animals for Ellie. Some were genuine. Others, maybe just afraid to be next on camera. HOA board members called us. Some said they were horrified. Others stayed silent. Jason received a formal email from the board. The HOA does not endorse or condone the behavior of Mrs. Calloway. An emergency vote will be held to review her leadership. Too little. Too late. Ellie was resting in her room with the lights off. She hadn't said much since the hospital. Just one thing, whispered over and over as she fell asleep. I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to be loud. That broke me. Because how do you explain to your child that singing joy is not a crime? That the world doesn't get to shame her for existing loudly? Jason sat beside me on the edge of the bed. His voice cracked. She was just being happy. And that woman hated it, I said, wiping tears. Because happiness like Ellie's is uncontrollable, untamed. And some people can't stand that. The first headline hit by sunrise. HOA president arrested for locking disabled child in hot car. By noon, it had spread nationwide. News anchors debated whether this was a mental breakdown, a power trip, or just plain cruelty. The words Karen and child endangerment trended together for 3 straight days. Online petitions demanded a permanent ban from any HOA leadership position in the state. But in our house, there was no celebration, only silence. Ellie hadn't sung in 3 days. Not even a hum. Her voice, the one thing that had always been louder than her diagnosis, louder than her fears, was gone. Not physically, but emotionally. She withdrew, drew with her markers in complete silence. Her bedroom, once filled with colorful notes taped to the walls, had become a quiet cave. Jason sat beside her one afternoon, softly playing the song she loved on his phone. She flinched. She's scared of her own joy now, I whispered. That woman didn't just hurt her body. She wounded her soul. Meanwhile, Mrs. Calloway, Karen, as the world now called her, was released on bail within 48 hours. Her lawyer claimed she was concerned for the welfare of the child, that her actions were misguided but well-intentioned. The HOA held a board meeting via Zoom the same week. Jason and I attended. Only 2 members showed their faces. The rest stayed muted, cameras off. The statement they gave was short. The HOA deeply regrets the incident and is cooperating with authorities. Mrs. Calloway has been removed from her role until further notice. Until further notice. Not permanently, not condemned, just on pause. I felt sick. We decided to file a civil lawsuit, not just against Mrs. Calloway, but against the HOA itself for fostering an environment where that kind of behavior was tolerated, even enabled. Our lawyer warned us. They'll settle quietly. They don't want this to go to trial. But we didn't want money. We wanted change. The first court date was set for the following month. I remember holding Ellie's hand as we entered the courthouse. She wore her favorite dress, the one with the tiny musical notes, and kept her eyes down the entire time. When the judge asked her name, she whispered it. Mrs. Calloway sat across the room, her hair pulled back tight, her lips pressed into a line. No sunglasses now. No power. Just a woman watching her carefully built kingdom crumble. Our lawyer played the dashcam footage. The silence in that courtroom was heavier than the heat of that July afternoon. The judge's jaw tightened as he watched Mrs. Calloway lock the doors and walk away. The footage ended with Ellie's crying face against the glass. I'd seen enough. After the first 15 seconds, the judge said, "This was not an accident. This was intent." Mrs. Calloway's attorney asked for leniency, citing her years of community leadership, her psychological stress, and her long-standing commitment to public safety. But public safety doesn't look like locking a child in a car to punish her for being loud. It looks like building ramps, not roadblocks. It looks like embracing the child who colors on sidewalks, not scrubbing away her existence. When it was my turn to speak, I stood beside Ellie, took a deep breath, and said, "My daughter sings when she feels safe. She sings when the world doesn't feel like it's closing in." That voice you just heard in the footage? That's not just noise. That's survival. That's joy. That's life. And this woman decided it was too inconvenient to tolerate. I looked directly at Mrs. Calloway. "You didn't just turn off my car, ma'am. You tried to turn off her spirit." There was no dry eye in the room. The judge ruled quickly. Mrs. Calloway was found guilty of felony child endangerment, sentenced to 18 months of probation, community service at a special needs center, and required to undergo psychiatric evaluation and anger management. It wasn't prison, but it was something. A record. A consequence. More importantly, it was public. Her name would forever be attached to that crime, and no HOA board would touch her again. But the emotional damage wasn't so easily undone. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the hearing, I found Ellie sitting in the backyard with Sophie. They had set up a fake stage with cardboard and glitter glue. I stayed back, watching through the kitchen window. Sophie whispered something, then nudged Ellie gently toward the stage. Ellie looked unsure, and then, slowly, she began to hum. It was soft, fragile, but it was her voice. Jason came up behind me. "Is that?" I nodded, tears welling. Her voice cracked on the second line, and she stopped. But she didn't cry. She smiled just a little and whispered, "I'm trying." Jason walked outside, sat cross-legged beside her, took her hand and hummed the melody with her. And for the first time in what felt like forever, our home felt like home again. Healing doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It comes in flickers, soft, uneven, uncertain, and sometimes in the voice of a little girl singing to her stuffed animals behind a cracked bedroom door. That's how we knew Ellie was coming back. At first, it was only when she thought no one was listening. A whisper of a melody here, a giggle while playing with her dolls there. She wasn't singing to us, she was singing despite us. Despite what had happened. Despite the fear. It was her quiet act of resistance, of reclaiming joy. She just wanted to play, I said one evening as Jason and I watched her chase bubbles in the backyard. That's all she ever wanted. Jason nodded. She's stronger than both of us. We began seeing a child trauma specialist. Not for Ellie, but with her. Therapy wasn't about fixing her. It was about reminding her she wasn't broken, that her voice didn't cause pain, that her song wasn't a weapon. One day in session, the therapist asked, "Ellie, why did you stop singing?" She looked down at her hands, then said softly, "Because the lady said it made people angry." I fought back tears. "You didn't do anything wrong, baby." She didn't reply, but she reached over and took my hand. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, the community changed too, more than I expected. Parents from the neighborhood who had once crossed the street to avoid us began waving. One woman, Maribel, knocked on our door with tears in her eyes. "I never stood up for you," she admitted. "I saw what she was doing. I stayed quiet. I'm sorry." She offered to organize a play date. And she did. For kids showed up that weekend with snacks and sidewalk chalk and a portable speaker. Ellie was hesitant at first, hovering behind me on the porch. But Sophie grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the others. They sat in a circle, drew unicorns, and eventually, someone turned on a Disney playlist. And just like that, Ellie sang. Not loudly, not perfectly, but fully, like herself. A video of that moment made it to a local news station. The headline this time was different. After HOA incident, local girl's voice inspires community to rebuild. Inspired by the outpouring of support, I launched a small group called Voices Without Apology. It started as an online forum for parents of neurodivergent and special needs children who had been silenced by neighborhoods, schools, even family. But soon it grew. We hosted virtual meetups, webinars, and even got coverage from a national parenting podcast. The message was simple. Joy is not disruptive. Joy is necessary. One of our proudest moments came when the school invited Ellie to sing at the end-of-year assembly. She was nervous, unsure, but we gave her the choice. "Only if you want to," I told her. She nodded slowly. Can I sing my song? The one I made up. Of course. That Friday, she walked onto the stage in a bright yellow dress. She didn't look at the crowd, just me and Jason in the front row. The room quieted, and then she sang. A song about colors, about sunlight, about being free, about how sometimes people don't like what they don't understand, but that doesn't mean we should stop shining. When she finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Some teachers cried. Sophie jumped out of her seat and clapped until her hands turned red. Afterward, one of the older boys came up and said, "You have a superpower." Ellie just smiled and said, "It's not a power. It's just my voice." And she was right. That summer, we finally moved to a new house. Not because we were afraid, but because we were ready. The old place held too many shadows. The new one had big windows, wildflowers in the yard, and neighbors who brought brownies on move-in day. On our first night, Ellie stood in the backyard, barefoot in the grass, and shouted, "I'm gonna sing now." And she did, at the top of her lungs. Nobody complained. Nobody called the cops. No Karen came storming out. Just crickets, fireflies, and music. 3 months later, the mailbox held a letter with no return address. Inside was a folded note, typed no signature. I was wrong. I see that now. Your daughter has more grace in her voice than I ever had in my heart. I hope someday she sings without fear again. I hope you all heal. I'm sorry. It wasn't signed, but we knew who it was from. I placed it in a shoebox labeled Ellie's Light, the one where we kept her drawings, the court letters, and the super singer badge she got from school. Proof of what we'd survived. But this story was never about Karen, or the HOA, or even us. It was about one little girl who refused to be silenced, who turned pain into music, and who, without knowing it, changed the way a neighborhood listened. A year later, a new family moved into the old Calloway house. They had a son with a sensory disorder, gentle, curious, and often misunderstood. One afternoon, his mom knocked on our door. "You're the family with the singing daughter, right?" I nodded. She smiled. "We heard this neighborhood changed because of her." Ellie stepped beside me and grinned. "I still sing," she said proudly. "Want to hear something?" The boy nodded shyly. And she sang. Right there on the porch. No fear. No apologies. Not because she was trying to make a point. Not because she was fighting back. Just because she wanted to. In a world that too often demands silence, let us never forget the power of one small voice. Studio Microphone subscribe to HOA Denied Access for more stories that uncover truth and fight injustice. Bell turn on notifications, because the next voice that needs to be heard might be yours.